So thanks to Jen H for having me here today. As was mentioned, I'm a planning commissioner in Sebastopol, have been for a number of years, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time. And last fall, the Planning Commission took a walk around Sebastopol. So I think it's really informative to kind of walk in your communities and see how the zoning code has really impacted how we build out. And so we took this walk, and I think it was really illuminating for a lot of people because a lot of things that we like about our community, we don't allow anymore from our zoning code standpoint. So I was telling Jen about this, and she thought everyone else really needed to hear about this, and other people should be doing this. So she invited me to speak here, and we're calling this, what if we built like our great-grandparents? And maybe some of you, maybe your great-great-grandparents, or maybe just your grandparents, but I'm looking at kind of communities that were built pre-zoning code, so kind of late 19th century, early 20th century, before zoning codes really took off, which really kind of started in the 1920s and 30s. So I think it's really, we built so differently back then, and there's a lot of reasons why our cities look the way they do, and they all kind of tend to come back to zoning codes. So I wanted to start by asking everyone to sort of picture like a favorite place of yours, and not a natural place, not the beach or the mountains or something like that, but like a favorite city or small town that you've been in, a favorite neighborhood. Maybe it was where your grandparents lived or your great-grandparents lived, but just some place that brings fond memories of like a vital, vibrant, charming place that you've been that you really like. Does anyone's memory look like something like this? No, no one's favorite place looks like this, but we have so much of this. We have thousands, hundreds of thousands of places that look like this across this country, right? Does anyone's favorite place look like this? Again, probably not. A multi-lane arterial road, strip shopping centers, car dealers, we see them everywhere. Do we love them? No, we don't. Business park, standalone office buildings separated from the street and sidewalk by big parking lots. Again, probably no one's favorite place that they've ever been. But again, we have a lot of this. And we have all these three kinds of places because of our zoning code. Our zoning codes are really good at separating uses. That's kind of how zoning codes came about. We put the housing here, we put the retail here, we put the businesses here. They're all separated, and now that they're all separated, we have to drive everywhere. So our zoning codes have really driven this auto-oriented environment that we all live in, and we don't really like, but this is what we have. So the question is like, why have we done this to ourselves? So this is a neighborhood that I find really charming. It's in Columbus, Ohio. It's a neighborhood I'm familiar with. I have some family that live here. It's called German Village. It's an inner, older neighborhood. It's just south of downtown Columbus. It was built in the 1800s. And you can see in this photo on the left, the middle of that is a small duplex. It's a story and a half. There's two front doors. There's two units there. And it's flanked on either side by a single-family home. On the right side, there's a single-family home on one corner, and across the street from that is a multi-use building. There's commercial ground floor, could be a cafe, could be a restaurant, could be a corner store. And upstairs, there's probably several apartments. And all of these coexist together. And it just, in my opinion, makes for such a richer environment. The houses are all closer to the street. It makes a better walking environment. You don't see a lot of car infrastructure. You don't see big parking lots. It's also lovely because of the range of housing choices, there's a range of people that live there. We're not all the same socioeconomic class, not all the same culture. It provides a lot of variety. So it adds to the richness of the neighborhood. The way we do neighborhoods now, you get a developer who builds a set of tract houses. They have like 4 or 5 house models. They're all basically targeting the same price point. Whatever that is, you get hundreds of houses that are all targeting the same price point. Coffee Park is one level, and Fountain Grove is a whole different level, but there's not any mixing. We don't really encourage that anymore. So, I looked at this neighborhood up on Zillow, and the house prices range from like the $300,000s to over $1 million. So again, like these are all people that are living kind of in close proximity. They're all neighbors. I think a lot of our kind of political separation we have is because we don't encourage the other, we don't meet the other anymore, and we do in these neighborhoods. We do meet the other. We see that we're all have a lot more in common than we have different. These kind of neighborhoods also allow kind of intergenerational living. You know, you can see, like, you get out of college, you get a little apartment above the corner store, you get a partner, you want something a little bit bigger, you move into the half of the duplex, you start a family, you need to buy a house, you buy a house in this neighborhood, your kids grow up and leave, and then you downsize to something smaller. And you can do that all in the same neighborhood, so you can stay in your community as you transition through life through different kind of housing phases. And you can't do that the way we build houses today because of our zoning codes. Just a couple more shots of that neighborhood. Again, just like a variety of housing types. And again, it just sort of adds to the richness, in my opinion. This is a couple shots of neighborhoods on the north side of Chicago. You know, a multi-story apartment building, has even probably basement apartments in here. So again, kind of probably a range of incomes. And then further down the block are single family homes. Some of those are probably duplexes. But again, they all kind of live in the same, neighborhood.
Was it designed that way, or is that just sort of accidental because it wasn't the kind of zoning we have nowadays?
I'm not sure specifically about this. I know, like, the German Village, it just sort of evolved because we didn't have kind of restrictions. It's like you bought a property and you built what you wanted to build on that property. You know, there was no kind of, the government wasn't telling you what you were allowed to build and what you couldn't build. So it just kind of naturally evolved, just like cities have done for thousands of years since we started building cities. There's this kind of natural evolution of kind of growing up and out, you kind of this incremental growth. And we've kind of short-circuited that process by our zoning codes, really.
I would say I read this book called Strong Towns, and it kind of talked about the evolution of how towns came about like this and how they were first designed and kind of the evolution over time.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, Strong Towns is a great organization. If you want to check out their website, they have a lot of information kind of along these lines. And their argument is this is what we used to do. We used to build, you know, think of like pioneers. They would move out to some place if they're crossing the country, and they would build a few little buildings around a main street. And over time, as they gained more resources, those buildings were expanded. And they could build either up or bigger or more permanent materials. And again, we kind of don't allow that with our zoning codes today.
When I think about those favored places, it seems like, was it purposely done that the wider streets had the more expensive homes on it, narrower streets had the less expensive?
You know, I don't think necessarily. I mean, I think there was really a variety. I mean, going back to that German Village, there was, you know, if you look at more throughout the neighborhood, you really get, like, you can get big grand Victorians next to, like, a little worker's cottage, you know, all on the same block. So it wasn't even, you know, some of them have, you know, a row house on the same block as a Victorian single family house. You know, there's just a lot more variety because there was just less control generally.
Well, and I think that you're kind of saying, kind of what's in my head, I hope I can get this out and make it make sense. But what I see in this picture that's so charming are mature trees, building materials that we don't use anymore, cobblestone streets, brick sidewalks.
Yeah.
So where's the new development that you can show us that has this charm with current building materials and practices?
I don't have any pictures of that. They're hard to find because we don't generally allow it. But let me just kind of continue on. So this is closer to home. This is actually in San Diego. This is a project, I think I've counted or assumed that's about 14 or 15 units. You can see some garages here on the alley, but there's definitely not even one space parking for that many units. And this is it's in the University Heights neighborhood, if anyone knows San Diego, which is, you know, there's some single family homes, there's multi-unit property, there's a lot of mix. This is definitely an early 20th century neighborhood. This is what that looks like on the ground, you know, just kind of quaint, small. I mean, we could build something that looks like this today, you know, but, you know, you're generally not allowed to be this close to the sidewalk in most places where we build. You're definitely allowed to have buildings that are like that close together, like that middle photograph. But, you know, that's been here for probably 100 years, and People, this is naturally occurring affordable housing. This isn't what Mark was talking about, like the complicated tax credit, multi-source capital stack. This is, people could afford to live here. And probably even today, this is affordable housing in San Diego. This is what we did before we had zoning codes, and this is what we did after we had zoning codes. Because when we started doing zoning codes, you started requiring parking. So this probably had no parking requirements when it was built. They just built what they wanted to build. This one had, I'm guessing there's probably 6 units in there because I see 6 garages. And then you can also park in front of your garage. So each unit has 2 parking spaces, which was probably what was required. And it doesn't create a great street frontage. If we had a whole bunch of these, it's not a great, you don't want to be walking just past all these garages as a pedestrian. But that's what we get when we, have 20-foot setbacks, have 2 cars per unit parking requirements. That's more the product that you're going to get rather than this, which would not comply with probably the current zoning code. And I got to go fast because I'm going to skip this one. This is a little closer to home. This is the McDonald neighborhood. These are 2 multi-unit properties, kind of catty-corner across an intersection. This is at Stewart and 14th, and Jen brought this to my attention because this is the neighborhood she used to live in with her ADU. Not exactly sure how many units are in these. I don't know if you know, Jen. I was guessing maybe 6. The one on the left has kind of an auto court. There's a driveway in the center, and there's some garages around that. The one on the right actually has a little pedestrian courtyard. But, most of the McDonald neighborhood is single-family homes, but these coexist just fine, This is right downtown, just a few blocks from here. This is 8th Street and B. There's I think maybe 8 to 10 unit apartment building on the corner next to single-family houses. And those single-family houses may be duplexes because they have that kind of basement level. And a lot of people turn that basement level into another unit. Again, they kind of coexist. In that neighborhood, this is the this is the St. Rose neighborhood. There's single-family houses, there's bigger apartment buildings, there's some commercial buildings. So again, we did do this at one time. This is scenes from a walk that we took in Sebastopol. So this project, it's right off of Main Street. It's at it's at High and Wilton. It was probably built as a single-family house in the late 1800s, is my guess. There's now 3 units in this building. It was subdivided at some point, probably without a permit, but it's 3 units of housing right now. And again, I would say this is probably naturally occurring affordable housing, but it does not meet our parking requirements. The zoning code also requires this lot to be, doesn't allow 100% residential product by right. You have to get a use permit to do 100% residential. It requires a mix of uses, and I see no reason why it would need to be a mixed-use project. I also say that this type of project could be anywhere in Sebastopol. Any single-family neighborhood could have a triplex like this because it's the scale of a single-family house. So that's kind of what we talk about when you hear like missing middle housing. It's like this kind of multi-unit house scale properties that would fit in a single-family neighborhood. You would never really know. This is downtown Sebastopol. So downtown Sebastopol, it's kind of your traditional downtown, buildings close to the sidewalk. The problem with the zoning code in terms of downtown Sebastopol is redevelopment opportunities. So the building in the middle photo was for sale a couple of years ago. In my mind, the best thing to do with that building would be to tear it down and do a multi-unit building there. You have to park it. Just to park that building that's there now, if you needed to provide all the parking that you were required to park today, it would take the entire lot. So you could park the whole thing, and then you could have a 1-story building above it. That's all you get because of our parking requirements. So downtown Sebastopol is kind of stuck. We're kind of frozen in amber because we don't allow it to take the next level of kind of next step in the development cycle. This is my favorite project to talk about in Sebastopol. The rest of the planning commissioner is probably sick of me talking about this project. This is, again, a great missing middle example. It's 6 small 2-bedroom units. It's on the corner of Main and Calder, again, like just a few blocks south of downtown. This also requires a mix of uses. Again, 100% residential seems totally appropriate in my mind. There's a lot of other, the strip used to be all single-family residential mostly. Some of those have been converted to commercial uses, so there's a mix already in the neighborhood. I don't know why we would require that to have a mix. This zoning district allows 15 dwelling units per acre. This project is 26 dwelling units per acre. And I could see even a third floor on here that would be completely fitting with the context, and that would be 39 units an acre if you had 9 units here. This project now would require 12 off-street parking spaces. There are 3 down this little driveway, which also does not meet any current development standards, that driveway. There's space for 3 cars. I wouldn't say it's a parking lot. There's space for 3 cars. One of which has been occupied by a boat for as long as I can remember.
So where do people park?
On the street. So next door to this house here, it's a single-family house, has a unit. They converted the attic to a unit, so there's 2 units there. They have no driveway, they have no garage, they have no off-street parking. On the Main Street side, next door to it, there's a single-family house that has no driveway, no garage. People park on the street, and there's 9 properties on this block, 7 of which have at least one other unit. I live around the corner from here. I walk by here several times a day, and there's always still parking available on the street. It just works. But this would not be allowed to be built in this way, no way today. The zoning would allow 3 units, and right now we have 6. This is just a couple blocks from there. It's in the single-family residential zone, the biggest zone we have in Sebastopol, the R4 district. It was probably originally a single-family house, been added onto, subdivided. There's 4 units in this right now. Does not meet our zoning requirements because it's too many units. It's a single-family lot, and also does not at all meet the setback requirements. This would require at least a 10-foot setback, if not 20 foot on that side, depending on the adjacent property. It's like maybe 18 inches of setback, but again, I think it's fine. This is just a single-family house, but this does not meet the zoning requirements because of the setback. It's about a foot from the sidewalk, not 10 feet. And also this lot is too small. We require 6,000 square foot corner lots. This is less than 5. But is it causing any great harm to the residents of Sebastopol? I don't think so. And then these are some more houses that none of them meet the setback requirements or the minimum lot size requirements. But they're fine. They're housing. I think they're all charming little homes. Like the setbacks are 6 to 8 feet from the sidewalk.
Sebastopol working to adjust their zoning code to be more flexible for alternative kind of build?
So next week, because of this walk we took, I've introduced to the Planning Commission. We have an item, the only item on our agenda next week is to talk about this. So I've made some proposals of things that I think we need to change to allow us to build like our great-grandparents used to build, who built these neighborhoods. Because we were on this walk, literally one of the commissioners said, so basically what you're saying is we've kind of zoned the charm out of our community. And I'd say that's exactly right. Our zoning code starts with, it's language that says, the zoning code is adopted to promote and protect the public health, safety, peace, comfort, convenience, and general welfare. Your city's zoning code probably starts with some very similar language. I don't think anything that I was just showing that we saw on our walk in Sebastopol negatively impacts, I think none of those projects are detrimental to public health, safety, peace, comfort, convenience, and general welfare. I would say those first three images of the subdivision, the arterial road, and the office park, I would say that those may have detrimental influence on our health, public safety, peace, and general welfare. But that's what our zoning code tells us we should do. So I would really encourage all of you to get out in your communities as these boards. It's much more fun to walk around a neighborhood than to sit behind a dais and look at proposed zoning code changes. I think it's really, it can be very educational if you kind of look at some of your older neighborhoods and think about, how could we do this again? Because you probably can't do it today. And if I have a minute for any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
What might be some of the barriers that are preventing jurisdictions from zoning back to something more similar to what you're talking about?
I think it's just motivation. I think there's fear about parking for sure. One of my proposals is, and this has been happening a lot across the country, more and more jurisdictions are getting rid of their parking requirements. We're kind of in a chicken and egg place right now, because we've spent so many years designing towards more auto-oriented infrastructure that it's hard to kind of rein that back in. So, because we have all these kind of spread out uses, most people need a car to get around. And it's hard to walk that back, but I think we have to start taking the steps. And I think, by eliminating your parking requirements doesn't mean that no one is ever going to build parking. It just means that you're not telling the developer some arbitrary number of parking spaces they need. And, it lets them kind of consider their context, know what other parking is available, know how much street parking is available, know what their target audience is. And, there's ways that, some bigger projects in particular, like they can have like a project car share program. So they can encourage people to have fewer cars because you have a car share option on your property. Or they decouple the parking from the units, so you can, if you have 2 cars, you have to buy the 2 parking spaces, rather than saying, okay, you rent this apartment, you get 2 parking spaces, and you're like, I only have 1 car, I don't want 2 parking spaces. Well, you're paying for it because, so if you kind of allow, don't require a certain number of spaces per unit, you let the tenant decide how many parking spaces they want, and they could pay for them or not. So there's a organization called the Parking Reform Network. I'd also encourage you to take a look at their website. They have a lot of information about parking and jurisdictions that have gotten rid of parking and what's happened subsequently. I've been told I have time. My time is over.
Yeah,
Okay, we can keep going.
So I could not agree more about parking, but to your question on some of the limiting factors, like we've got a large development project underway that like the 9 units with a little sliver of a driveway, you can't get a fire truck down there. Like there are safety requirements that police will tell you that crime prevention through certain kinds of design, like we don't build on top of each other for other reasons that are really enlightened reasons as well.
But I'll say like that. So that property that had the little parking lot down the little driveway, totally accessible for firefighting. I mean, it's on a corner. Typically the fire, you have to have a 20-foot width. For bigger projects, you have to be able to drive in and out. Like there was to my knowledge, like no fire department would be required to drive into that property. That's not something they would require you to, even today, if you were to build that 9-unit property, they would not require you to drive into that property. That's over like a certain number of units or size. So this could totally be, fire fought, if that's a word, given that arrangement. And so the missing middle, there's also, one of the ways you kind of control the size, like we think we can control the size by setbacks, is what we have attempted to do. What would be a better way to do it is dictate the maximum size of the building. So how wide can the building be? How deep can a building be? How tall can a building be? Like that's how you get a product that's going to fit with a single-family neighborhood. So you figure out what the maximum envelope is that's going to fit in that environment, and you put that into your code and let the setbacks be what they are. I mean, you're going to get a better physical outcome of a walkable, community-oriented neighborhood if you do that rather than relying on setbacks to do that for you.
I was just gonna say too, and what's great about this kind of conversation is like in regards to I was gonna mention the fire truck turnaround also, and then the new requirements for spacing in between eaves and other structures. But as far as parking, like usually all of the zoning development standards, they all came from something that got brought forward that the council or planning commission or decision-making body approved, right? So it came from somewhere. It's a reflection of the desire of the community. Sometimes things don't pan out like we want, which is natural, right? So it's also just a shift in what people
people want, and if that's what the majority of the people want, the idea is that goes to council and then gets implemented into the code. So
Yeah.
it's also just a reflection of.
So yeah, I think that's why, you know, we're bringing this to the Planning Commission in Sebastopol next week, some of these recommendations, revisions, and we'll have a discussion and we'll make a decision. We'll refer it to the city council and they'll decide. And I think having had done this walk, again, really changed people's opinions. Because it's one thing, because we updated our zoning code 7 years ago, and you're sitting in your meeting and you're reading the setbacks and think, okay, 20-foot front yard setback, sure, why not? That sounds fine. You know, what's the harm in that? And then you walk around the neighborhood and you think, oh, that's not 20 feet, that's not 20 feet, that's not 20 feet. Like, why do we have a 20-foot setback? Like, why was that determined good? And it's, so again, like, I think the walk is super important, you know, and even if you don't do it as a formal group, I encourage all of you to kind of do this on your own. Like, take your zoning code standards and walk around a neighborhood that you like and figure out, could I build this neighborhood again today with the standards that we have in place? Because all these properties we looked at in Sebastopol are what's called legal non-conforming. They're legal because they were built before we even had a zoning code, but they're non-conforming. So they don't comply with our zoning code today. You can never build that today, but we don't make people tear them down. So they have this kind of weird legal status. So my point is, like, let's just make these legal. Why have we made these illegal? Let's make these legal, and let's allow this to happen in other places in the community.